It was a Friday night, and my parents were away for the weekend, which left me alone in my lonely house. I barely stayed at home alone, as I was only 14 at the time. They had my auntie come and stay with me during the day, but at night, she had to go home. I can remember the night like it was yesterday. Everything seemed fine at first. I kept myself busy by doing homework and watching Netflix, and of course, eating all the snacks. Hours passed, and the house got darker. I was settled in the lounge and had all the lights on around me. It was around 7 in the evening, and I was watching TV. It was getting dark outside and lonely inside, so I tried to distract myself and started watching a new series on Netflix. I was about halfway through the 3rd episode. That's until I heard something drop from the kitchen counter. I paused the TV and slowly walked my way to the kitchen to investigate. That's when I saw a knife on the floor. I picked it back up and put it back in the knife stand. I knew it was only me here. We had no animals that could have accidentally done it. It did shake me up. I took myself back to the lounge and FaceTimed my auntie to take my mind off things. We were only on the phone for 25 minutes as she had to go and cook tea for her family. I felt better, but it kept playing on my mind. I unpaused the TV and continued on with the episode. I must have nodded off because all I remember was waking up to tapping coming from the window. The curtains were shut. I pulled them back, expecting an animal on the window frame, but there was nothing. I finished my homework, which I abandoned hours ago, and decided to call it a night. I went to bed at 10, mainly to escape this weird feeling. I was woken by my bed sheets being tugged on. I shot up instantly. I made a bold mistake to go downstairs and get a glass of water. Once I entered the kitchen, I switched the lights on and saw the knife back on the floor. Now I started panicking. Someone must be in my house, I thought. I checked the time and it was 2 in the morning. I walked around the house with my phone's flashlight on and shouted out if anyone was there. Of course, there was no reply. I headed back to my room as that was the only place I felt safe. I messaged my mom and explained the situation as I no longer wanted to be on my own. Just as I pressed send, the tapping started again. This time, I started sweating due to the fear. I didn't dare look again. Instead, I called my auntie and asked her to pick me up. 20 minutes later, she arrived. I had a bag with a few things in it and stayed at hers, as I knew I couldn't stay there much longer. My parents arrived home later that day. I explained everything, and they didn't seem to believe it, due to them never experiencing anything. I spent weeks with my bedroom lights on and window blinds shut, even in the daytime. It's been a year, and nothing has happened since. My parents never believed me, and blamed it on my mind playing tricks on myself. I know what I heard and saw, and I know most certainly I wasn't losing my mind. I worked in a small office on the outskirts of London. It was a fairly small office, and there was only me and 5 other workers. We all ran a clothing business together. I had stayed back one evening to focus on some advertising and to manage some of the social media accounts. Everyone had left for the day except my boss, Anna. She was staying behind to create more content. I put my head down and let nothing distract me because I kept telling myself the quicker I get it done, the quicker I can get back home. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes from the office. Now, this is where things get a little creepy. Anna had asked me to go down to our storage room and get a few clothes from there, as she was trialing some things out. I barely went down here, as it was in the basement of the office, and I was always creeped out with how dark and cold it was down there. Anyway, I did what was asked of me and headed down. I grabbed the clothes she had requested, and just as I was about to run back up the stairs, I heard something move. Something was telling me to go back upstairs and ignore it, but the other half of me was telling me to look. Unfortunately, I chose to be nosy. I looked around to ensure I hadn't dropped anything on my way out. Silly, really, as I'm always careful. I searched the floors and the boxes, and everything was in its place. Until I noticed on one of our clothing rails, there was a coat hanger swinging. I didn't look back. I just headed out. The reason I left so quickly was because I never went in that area. The clothes I got were from some boxes. And no, there were no clothes on that rail, so nothing would have fallen off. I told Anna what had happened, and she didn't say much. To make matters worse, she told me she had to close up her tasks as she had to get home, and she politely asked me to make sure the office was locked up. The thing is, I am comfortable locking up, as I have done it a few times in the past. The thing I wasn't comfortable with was staying alone. I kept pushing myself, as I only had one advertisement left to edit and post, which would take around an hour roughly. I also kept telling myself that maybe there was a loose hanger and it had fallen, causing the hanger to move. I knew deep down that it wasn't a good enough reason, but I had to pretend it was. Just as I was closing up my computer, my coworker's chair, which was at the desk next to mine, had moved by itself. It didn't move much, but it moved enough for me to know that it was not caused by wind or anything human. I grabbed my bags, locked the main office door, and headed to my car. I got to my car and had to take a minute to comprehend what was happening. I believe in good and bad spirits, but nothing in my 24 years like that has ever happened to me. I headed home and decided to make a microwave meal and head to bed. It was only 8 at night, but I tried blaming my tiredness on what I had witnessed. I nodded off on the sofa and woke up a few hours later. It was 11:30, so I decided to get ready for bed. I didn't stress too much, as I had a couple of days off work. As I was walking up the stairs, I heard something drop on the kitchen floor. I thought to myself, this couldn't be happening. Has the spirit, or whatever it was, followed me back home? I went to the kitchen and hoped it was nothing, but when I entered, I saw my empty microwave pot in the middle of the floor. Now at this point, I was 100% certain this was something paranormal. I had put my pot far back on the side, so there was no way it had fell by itself. Something had pushed it. I went straight to bed, as I couldn't take any more. As I lay in my cold bed, I started questioning myself. Was I hallucinating? No, I can't be. I have never hallucinated before. I knew this wasn't me. It was something sinister. A couple of days passed, and nothing had happened. I was weary about going back to work, but again, nothing had happened. It's like it was all made up. Whatever it was, it disappeared, leaving me with 100 questions. The scariest, unexplainable thing that I have ever experienced happened to me 2 years ago today. Skip back a bit to when I moved into a small apartment in Pennsylvania. This was my first time living alone and owning my own place, so my nerves were already high as it was. I had my brother come stay with me for a couple of nights and help me set everything all up. I took a few days off work to move in and get comfortable in my new home. Those couple of nights were fine and flew by quickly. About a few days had passed, and I was staying there by myself. I went back to work, and everything was going well. I worked a 9-to-5 job as a sales advisor, and in my evenings, I would either go to the gym or visit family. I was always so tired after work and would aim to be in bed for 10 so I could achieve my goal of 8 hours of sleep. I arrived home from work at 5:45, and I didn't feel like doing anything other than watching TV and eating lots of food. As I was resting on the couch, I noticed something in my window. I looked over, and it looked like a shadow of something. I couldn't make it out. I walked towards the window, and it had disappeared. I looked around outside, and nothing was there. Only the cold, fresh air hitting my face. I questioned what I was looking for, and why I was looking, because I was on the 3rd floor, and nothing other than birds could possibly be outside my window, right? I slumped back on my couch and decided to finish watching my program. I'll admit, in that moment, I just brushed it off. I continued to stuff my face, and before I knew it, my program had finished. I sat myself upright and turned the TV off. As the screen went dark, my eyes locked onto something strange reflecting off the screen. The only way I can describe it, and it still freaks me out to this day. It was tall and thin-built, with a small amount of hair and demonic eyes. Honestly, it felt like my soul left my body. I ran to my bedroom and slammed the door shut. I pushed my bedside table in front of the door to block it. I texted my brother, but there was no reply. He must have been asleep. It was hard, but I decided to try and get to sleep, as I was truly too scared to leave that room. I slept a few hours, and as soon as daylight entered my window, I felt a little safe. I gathered a few things together and chucked them in a paper bag, grabbed my car keys, and left. I arrived at my family home and told them everything. I no longer wanted to live there, so I stayed with my family in search of a new home. I can't honestly describe the feeling I felt that night. I knew there was no way I was going to continue living there. My family were happy for me to stay with them until I found another place. I eventually, after a couple of months, found another place, and it worked out better for me as it was only 10 minutes from my work. Thankfully, I have never experienced anything like that in my new home, and I hope it continues to stay that way. My family must think I was crazy, but my gut never lies, and if I stayed, I believe it would have kept happening, and something bad could have happened.